grad students? No grad students yet. Okay. How many people are majoring in psychology? Great. Sociology, child and family studies, social work. All right. That's awesome. What else what have I missed that you were majoring in? Anything? Yes.
Double major in psychology and women, gender, and sexuality.
Women, gender, and sexuality. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. So I covered most of them, I thought, maybe. Those are some typical interest majors and interest areas. So thank you very much. And I think we'll get started now. So first, if we can have each of the panelists just introduce yourself. Tell us your name and your current role. So what you currently, where you currently work, what you're currently doing, and a little bit about your educational background. So undergrad, master's, PhD, whatever that may be. What did you get it in and where? And we can popcorn around, so we don't have to always go in order, but we'll just start at this end and go down for this time. Is that okay?
I'm Pete Young. I'm a psychologist, neuropsychologist. I work here in town. I work one day a week at a Cornerstone rehab facility for alcohol and drug issues. I also consult with the UTK Center. They're doing trials for drugs for Alzheimer's, so I do evaluations of people in those trials. Mostly I work in my own office, though. PhD from here at UT, master's from Western Carolina University, and a bachelor's from UNC in Chapel Hill in anthropology and philosophy.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. And you're a neuropsychologist. Okay. And was that your specialization in your PhD program, or was it called something else?
No, UT doesn't really have a neuropsychology
that's what I thought. Okay.
program. But it was real clear to me after I got my master's and worked with that for a while that I didn't know enough.
Sure.
And the more I learned, the more it was clear to me that the evaluations I was doing, they weren't hitting the nail on the head. In fact, sometimes they weren't even coming close. So I wanted to try to find a way to actually help people. The neuropsychology has turned out to be very beneficial.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
I'm Ashley Burgess. I am an adult therapist at the Helen Ross McNabb Center. I got my bachelor's degree here at UT in Child and Family Studies with a community outreach concentration, and then I went to LMU and got a master's of education in mental health counseling.
Yeah, and so and you work at Helen Ross McNabb.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also work in private practice a little bit?
I do PRN work in private practice, and I also do PRN work with mobile crisis.
Okay, and so PRN work is kind of part-time or as needed, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. All right, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Matthews, and I work at Mississippi State in the counseling center there. I'm a licensed professional counselor, mental health service provider, and I've been at Mississippi for about 4 years now. And prior to that, I worked community mental health with a local agency for about 6 or 7 years, and also did some crisis work. And let's see, my education, so I got a bachelor's in psychology from the university, master's in mental health from here at UT. And I'm currently also in a doc program for counselor education here at UT as well.
Thank you. All right, Jennifer.
So I'm Jennifer. I think that says Smith.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. My last name is.
I must have mistyped it. I'm so sorry.
So I work here on campus. I work in the counseling center, which is in the student health building, and I do counseling and outreach there. I also do, I help people get connected to providers in the area. So like they need to go to McNabb or they need to see someone else for like a longer term, I do that as well. So I have a MSW, which is a master's in social work from here. I graduated in 2012, and I also have an undergrad in English. I graduated in 2009 from here. Prior to working on campus, I worked at Cornerstone also, so I did alcohol and drug treatment. I did inpatient and outpatient there for 4 years, and then I got a job here on campus.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. So, to just kind of give us a broad overview of what each of you do, can you tell us a little bit about a typical day, or maybe if a day is not really typical, a typical week that you might have, and the kinds of things that you spend your time on? And we can popcorn, so anyone can answer first.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
My weeks vary. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I do evals in the morning, 9 to 12, and then I see patients usually 1 to 7 or 8. And then Thursday mornings, I go out to Cornerstone and do evals out there, write them up. Sometimes Thursday afternoon, I also see people. And then Friday is often a fill-in day, trying to catch up with everything I haven't taken care of. I do a fair number of legal assessments where I end up in court. That can be exciting and daunting.
Yeah.
But it's really intriguing how the neuropsychological evaluations does offer benefits that otherwise you don't get. At this point, it's not because I'm that great, but I'm booked through 2018 for evals. There's not enough neuropsychologists. I'm the only person in town that looks at children neuropsychologically. So there's a great need. Anybody who wants to go to neuropsych, it's needing folks.
When you say evals, are those written assessments? What are those? I'm curious. I don't really know.
Well, this little boy that I'm in the midst of evaluating now, he's really kind of a nice kid. He's adopted, he's 15, he's black, his parents are white. I don't think that's an issue, but it potentially could be. He had tubes twice when he was younger. That's always a red flag that there might be some auditory processing problems. And indeed, his hearing is really pathetic. And his mother's sitting there with him. He's tied to her really, and she needs to be in the room for him. He's 15. She's still somebody who needs to have present. Anyway, he doesn't hear well and he doesn't see well, so he has what I call a double whammy, visual and auditory processing problems. And his sleep is really corrupted. He doesn't sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a night, and nobody, even including his doctors, don't even give him melatonin. So we've got him scheduled for a sleep study. We're going to get an audiological eval and a visual processing eval deeper than I can get. And high probability that will help. As well, he also manifests some depressive stuff, which isn't surprising. Here he is, 15, he's in a high upper class home, and he's making D's and thinking those are okay, or saying he thinks those are okay. But I don't really think he thinks they're okay. I think he's blowing smoke. But nonetheless, that's what he's doing. He's 15 and making D's and not worried about anything. See, he's in a family where people are aware of what's going on in the world, and he knows when he gets to 18, he's either going to have to get a job, go to college, do something. He's oblivious. So, along with the processing problems, there's this psychological component. So, seeing both sides of that and dealing with it, that's really challenging. And it usually takes about 15 hours of testing to do the testing. So
Okay. Interesting. All right. Ashley?
So I do intake assessments, which are different from the evaluations that you were talking about. On people, I usually do about 5 or 6 of those a week, and those are just on new clients that are coming to the Center for Services. And so for assessments, I see both kids and adults. They're for people like very low income that have TennCare or don't have insurance. Sometimes they're court ordered to come for an assessment. Sometimes DCS wants the kids to come or the parents to come. And sometimes they're coming just because they're seeking help. And so what I do in that process is just gather up a bunch of information, look at their symptoms, make a provisional diagnosis, and recommend them with services. The rest of my time, I do individual therapy. Occasionally, I'll do family therapy or couples therapy, but that's not very common. A lot of the clients that we have a lot of trauma that they've experienced, and so that's majority of the time. That's the focus of therapy, is working on processing through that.
Right. And I'm not sure, some people might be very familiar, but can you explain a little bit about Helen Ross McNabb and what the mission is, or a little bit about who they treat, who they see?
Yes. So Helen Ross McNabb is a community mental health center. We're in, I don't even know how many counties, but a lot. We have several clinics in different centers. We offer inpatient and outpatient services, social services, mental health services, criminal justice services. We just started a program with Knox County Jail for a drug court to try to help with a lot of the opioid addiction that's so prevalent right now. We've got a lot of grant money from the state to increase our services in those areas to help with that. So that's the main part of what we do. work with, the quote is the sickest of the sick and the poorest of the poor. Our mission is just improving the lives of the people that we serve. And so that is kind of the focus in all of our services, is that we do those things and serve that population.
Great, thank you. All right, Lisa.
So sort of like a day or a week in the life.
Yeah.
I'll do little Pellissippi since
Yeah.
that's where I'm at now. I feel really fortunate with my job. I have a lot of freedom and flexibility to kind of change up my time allocations as needed. So there may be some weeks that I do more counseling and therapy with students, and then other weeks where I may do more in the classroom work or outreach, just depending on, with the semester when the students are there. If the summer, it thins out a little bit and I don't have as many students, so I do a lot more outreach, a lot more career work. But I would say a typical week, I would maybe spend anywhere from like 65 to 75% of my time in individual counseling sessions with students. I have students that I see on a recurring basis, and then we also take walk-ins. So I would say daily, I can expect to get at least 1 or 2 walk-ins. And I should note that there's 3 of us on the campus that I work on, so we're all sharing those walk-ins. So we can all expect to get a couple of walk-ins pretty much every day. And then of course I've got my usual clients that I see. And my individual therapy time is split between personal counseling, which we would categorize that as like personal issues sort of outside of the school that are affecting the student. So grief, anxiety, depression, gender and sexuality issues, things like that. And then we also do career counseling. So we give career assessments, do career exploration, and that would maybe account for the second largest portion of my individual clients. So personal counseling is the greatest, career counseling, and then I do a small amount of academic counseling. So students that may have academic issues preventing them from being successful in the classroom, if it's something that we can handle there that's not a medical issue, then we work with students on things like time management, test anxiety, how to prioritize, things like that. So 65-75% of my time individual counseling, and then I also get the opportunity to go into classrooms a lot, like our freshman orientation classes, and I do presentations about career, about what counseling services are. I've been a part of, just as an example, our math department got a grant to do some work with students experiencing anxiety around math. And so we did a lot of presentations and working with students who were experiencing anxiety around math, and so we did that in the classroom. So there's a lot of, it's a variety of things. Every month we do an outreach of some kind, so substance use awareness, domestic violence, things like that. We do sort of an educational component. So I get to do a variety of things. And then of course we have crisis management as it comes up. Crisis management.
Thank you. All right, Jennifer, a typical week, what does that look like?
Kind of like what you were saying, one thing I really like about my job and kind of the field of social work overall is people can do kind of a lot of things with that. And so I really like that in my job I do individual counseling, and then I do outreach, and then I meet with people like to connect them with providers, either on campus if they need to come here or they need to go to help like with their math class or something, then I'll kind of help them with that. Or if they want to find a long-term provider in the community, then I would try to find them someone there. And so I like that, I also, there's some things I do every week, and then within that I kind of make my own schedule, and I say I'll see this person. There's people that I've seen for like probably, we have a 12-session cap on our appointments, which some of you might know if you've been over to the counseling center. But there's some I've seen for like 15 or 20 because they started last year, and I've seen them again, and so those would be longer term. And then I do the walk-in appointments as well, which is how people access all our counseling. So that's kind of exciting because you get to see people who are coming in and you don't really know what they're going to talk about. And so that is something that provides some variety to kind of like the day or the week. And so I really appreciate that I'm kind of have the opportunity to do a lot of things. At Cornerstone also I did individuals, groups, and like some outreach with them, but like not that much. And so I really like being able of different things and money.
Jennifer, I have a question for you. You said you were an English major in undergrad. Did you go straight into your social work program, or did you take time off before you did that?
So I graduated in 2009, and kind of the link between those is, so I love to read always, and I think before I knew that counseling was a thing, or like mental health problems was a thing, I knew that like I loved to read books, and that like those made me feel more like normal and more like connected, and I could like see myself and like the people in the books, and that the books really helped me. So I like love to learn to read, and I just realized at some point that it's so much like counseling, and that like if a character did something in the book on page like 310, even if like maybe it wasn't the best decision, like you kind of understood why they did that, right? Because you got to know them and you got to really appreciate them. And it's actually a lot like counseling, because you get to hear the story of the person, you get to kind of help them clarify what they're thinking. Like, is somebody else writing your story? Are you a passive person in your story? Are you an active person? Like, what can we do to change the ending of this story? So it kind of became, and I still think that it's so much like writing and reading. But to answer your question, I worked for a year at a coffee shop while I was like figuring life out.
Yeah.
And then I went back in 2010, so the very next year, I actually also did a thing called the Knoxville Fellows Program, which is through, it's a faith-based thing, 10 months, 6 girls, 6 guys living in downtown, going to church and like doing like outreach to the community and like taking classes and kind of like living and learning together. So that was 10 months in between undergrad and grad school. I almost forgot about that. Kind of an important 10 months. And then I went to grad school after that.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. So I want to address several different things. Some address some myths, I think, that we have about the field, address some common issues and questions. But the first thing I would want to ask about, so everyone on this panel has either their master's or a doctoral degree, a PhD. But from your knowledge, from where you work, what are the different kinds of careers you can have at the bachelor's level, the master's level, and the doctoral level? And anyone can sort of answer that. In the field of mental health and social services, what are those different types of careers?
I can speak to
Yeah,
that to
absolutely.
start with, because I kind of took that
That's great.
route myself.
Perfect.
So when I had my bachelor's degree in psychology, you know, of course, as I was getting to the end, I was told that, you know, you need a master's if you're going to actually use this degree. And I was like, oh, that's good to know. You know, but that's not necessarily true, so don't be discouraged. So I started out working for a community agency doing like case management type work. And you can do that with a bachelor's degree. A lot of places will hire you on to do that. Kind of entry-level work. So we, you know, we worked with families in the home. We worked with kids who were in foster care, kids aging out of foster care, getting them connected with community resources, sort of like a case manager role. We weren't sitting down to do therapy. I couldn't diagnose or anything like that. But I worked under somebody who was a licensed therapist and could make recommendations for treatment and things like that, because insurance did cover our services. Now, I will say they have made some changes to that recently. I think more and more they're moving now towards needing a master's degree to even do that. But way back when I was graduating, you could do that with a bachelor's degree. You can also do things like you may have heard of like a DCS caseworker or something like that. You can do that with a bachelor's degree in the mental health field, working with, you know, children and families, reuniting them, helping to place them in foster homes, things like that. I'm trying to think, and the others will come up, I'm sure, with more ideas. But as far as with a bachelor's degree, you know, a lot of programs, maybe like Emerald Youth Foundation, a lot of nonprofits, adoption agencies, things like that. They always need people that are case managers, family support specialists. You know, maybe you know, you're working with kids and families, but you're not really doing mental health work necessarily. There's not a whole lot of mental health work you can actually do with just a bachelor's degree. But then moving up to a master's degree, because my master's was in mental health, that's when you can start working with clients one-on-one. You can start doing provisional diagnoses as long as you're being supervised by somebody else. And there's a lot of nuances there. I won't get into the nitty gritty, but you don't just get a master's and then just get out there and start diagnosing people. There's a whole licensure process that follows your master's degree that takes anywhere from like 2 to 4 years, depending on how quickly you go before you can fully be out on your own. Billing insurance and things like that. But you kind of work under somebody, and again, you would work in jobs like a lot of us have, not neuropsychology, but in any job that we have, a master's degree would qualify you to work in a counseling center, something along those lines. So, and then the PhD that I'm getting is counselor education, and that's more of like a faculty track or like a clinical director kind of track. So,
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else have any other thoughts?
I also started out working case management
Okay, perfect.
when I got my bachelor's degree, and I did that for almost a year before I started on my master's, and then I continued that while I was in grad school. And so, like she said, those positions are changing because TinCare's made some changes, and so there's still a few case management jobs out there, but they've just changed what a lot of them look like, what the job description is.
more geared towards a master's degree.
And then the other option would be working in a residential program as a direct care staff, and that would be, there would be probably a therapist in that program, and then somebody who provides like clinical oversight to the program. But as far as the like day-to-day activities of the clients and or patients, you can work in a position like that as well.
Absolutely. So I think those are good overviews of like the bachelor's, what you can do at the bachelor's level, what you can do at the master's level. I sometimes get questions from people about master's level, like a master's level professional counselor or clinical social worker versus a PhD level counseling psychologist or a PhD level clinical psychologist. What is the difference there in the scope of practice or the types of settings you can work in, that kind of thing?
Well, when I worked with my master's, I had to be under the supervision of a PhD.
Okay.
And so that's one factor. To me, the amount of knowledge that you learn by going to the doctorate level, PhD stands for pop high and deep, but nonetheless, it also gets you more information.
Sure.
And that makes a big difference. It really does.
And I would say, as far as career opportunities go, and this could be my limited understanding, because the PhD program that I'm in is not necessarily a clinical one, but there's a lot of assessments that psychologists can give, and there is a big focus. A lot of there are some disorders that only a licensed psychologist can diagnose, so a licensed counselor cannot. And there's a lot more. It's assessment heavy, from what I understand. It can be.
Can be, doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be, yeah. Certainly a counseling psychologist can do any of the work, that we're doing, but there's not that same flow of us being able to do the psychological assessments that somebody, that's a clinician like that can do, so.
When I went to my internship, after you've done your coursework, you have to do your internship. I went to my internship out in Salt Lake City, and it was really intriguing. There was one girl there, this is just sort of talking about the differences in programs, and she was from Arizona State. She had not spent 1 hour sitting talking to someone or administering any kind of tests. She had 17 publications to read. So it was a very science quote-unquote oriented program. Whereas the UT program at the point was almost all clinical applied.
Right.
People here don't get their research done. I just see people.
Well, and
there's 2 tracks at UT though. There's the clinical and the counseling. Clinical is more focused on research, counseling is more focused on practice.
And I have a friend who did organizational psychology at NC State. He's teaching out at Columbia and Berkeley. So
that is a good point with the PhD in psychology, counseling, or clinical, either one, there is a big research component. You will do a dissertation, whereas with the master's programs in mental health counseling, clinical social work, marriage and family therapy, school counseling, you would not necessarily have to do a thesis or a dissertation. Most of them are comps-based master's programs where you just take a culminating exam. So that is a good difference. But it sounds like in terms of scope of practice, the PhD allows you to supervise a lot of others, What about as an LCSW and LPC, which stands for Licensed Clinical Social Worker or Licensed Professional Counselor? You can go out on your own and not need supervision, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we could work in private practice.
Yes.
I could build insurance, be on insurance panels, do all those same things. I could have my own practice if I wanted to get a business license or work for a different practice. It's just you might bill at a different rate, than a clinical psychologist would bill. And again, there are, and it's kind of complicated, but there's A level, B level, C level assessments, and I can only give certain ones, whereas a psychologist can give, that next level of assessment. So
Yeah, I think just overall, like kind of the higher you get in education, the more you're able to specialize in like
Right.
particular things that you're interested in.
Mhm.
So I think at like, for example, in MSW, we get like information about a lot of things, and then I think like to get a PhD, you'll get more information about all those things, and then a lot of information about the things that you're particularly interested in. And so I think that people with higher education are just have more information and also are able to kind of pick what they're interested in and dig into that a lot more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Another thing that I think is worth commenting, I know, because I've been there, when you get your bachelor's, you're gonna think, oh, now I've done it. No. When you get your PhD, it'll be the same thing. You think, now I've done it. That's when I just start learning.
Yeah.
I mean, you just keep growing if you're gonna do something.
Yeah. It's a continual learning process, no matter where you're in. Absolutely. So let me ask a little bit about, you've mentioned some of your backgrounds. If someone is interested in the mental health and social service field, and let's say they're an undergrad and they're just looking at some different programs, either for a master's or a PhD, or looking at possibly getting a job in the field at the bachelor's level, what are some different ways that you would recommend that they gain experience? It could be volunteering, it could be interning, it could be undergrad research, service learning, anything that you know of or that you personally did or that you would recommend doing to gain experience in the field and gain exposure. No popcorn.
I worked for Outward Bound for years. I don't know if y'all know what Outward Bound is, but I guess I've done 50 courses for Outward Bound.
Yeah.
Take kids out in the woods, stress them, talk to them, stress them some more, talk to them some more. And the basic idea at Outward Bound is whatever your anxieties are, that's a poor indicator of your capacities. So you go out and you sort of scare people, and when they see they can do it, and they learn that they have more capacities.
Outward Bound, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of an organization where you're working with children and youth that are in some kind of need and mentoring them.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, there's special programs. I work
Sure.
programs with Vietnam vets. I work with
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I
cancer
didn't think about that.
survivors.
Yeah,
Programs with adjudicated youth.
sure.
Different groups.
Okay, thanks. Ashley, you have any advice?
Yeah, I started working, my first job in this field was with Emerald Youth Foundation while I was an undergrad. And I just kept looking for more opportunities. I loved working for Emerald Youth Foundation. They're a great organization, but I just felt like I couldn't do enough. And so that's when I started looking for jobs closer to this field. And even after I got my bachelor's degree and was working, I still kind of felt like I couldn't do enough to help people, and that's why I went back to grad school. But any of those jobs kind of in that field, working with whatever population you're wanting to work with in the future. And there's a lot of volunteer opportunities. There's like Big Brothers Big Sisters. McNabb has a lot of volunteer programs. And so there's definitely a lot out there for that.
Absolutely, and Emerald Youth does offer paid AmeriCorps positions, and it's a good way to kind of get your feet wet while you're still in undergrad during the summer, during the school year, so.
Wouldn't Cornerstone have some options for undergrad students?
Yeah, so yeah, like you were saying, you could be kind of a you staff, and so you'll be kind of the person who drives the van, or like kind of rounds everybody up for lunch, or says like kind of organizes some of the things and helps people out. And so that's definitely could be a job for someone who is maybe considering being in the field, and that would be a great way to kind of get some experience with that. I also think really good advice that I got, particularly if you're interested or you think you're interested in doing individual counseling, is just go to counseling. Like,
That's a good point.
be a client in counseling and see what that feels like, and kind of especially if you are in school to do that, I think it's important to like kind of work out your own stuff, and so that stuff doesn't come up in the room with the client, and that's something that's kind of like important in our field. And so that was like really heavily pushed in our program, and that's something that has been kind of consistently helpful for me.
And this is the only time that counseling is free, so
Right.
you should go now. It's cool.
Yeah, there's a horrible thing called a co-payment, which you'll have to do.
And it's not cheap, so
Yeah.
this is a great time to go if you're going to go. And I would add, I mean, people have talked a lot about jobs that you can get. I would say even just find some professional organizations that you might be interested in. So I'm part of the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network. There's a Tennessee Licensed Professional Counselor Association. There's a Smoky Mountain Counseling Association. I mean, and I could go on and on and on and on with all the groups that there are that meet, that focus on maybe a specific mental health effort that you can get involved in serving. You can be a student member of any of those groups. It's a very small fee. Student rates are like $10 a year, $30 a year. And not only is it a great networking opportunity, if you do want to get into the field and you want to land a certain kind of job that you have your eye on, is getting to know other professionals. I mean, and I will say, there are not, I mean, I don't see a ton of student members at those events. I see a few here and there, but you would sort of be, it would really draw attention to, I guess is what I'm saying. If you came to that group, like if you knew, I want to be a licensed professional counselor in Tennessee, I really want to work in a private practice, start going to that as a student, when you're in school now as an undergrad or while you're getting your master's, and you'll set yourself up well to find a job in the future. And then of course coming to things like this, I mean service learning, I think we've covered a lot of the others, but I would say find the professional organizations and get involved.
And the rates of those are lower than they would be for like a professional. Oftentimes they have a rate that's like $20 or $30 or something. That's pretty affordable.
Yeah, for us it might be
Yeah.
$150 or $200 a year, but for students it's very affordable.
Yeah.
One other thing is,
That's right.
even if you're not sure like what it is that you want to do, but you have a population or issue that you're interested in, you could just get online and search like organizations for animals, or organizations with homelessness, or organizations for like kids or something, and just like learn what's out there and kind of contact some of them to see if they have any opportunities.
And that's a great point. I mean, as far as volunteer work, like maybe, I don't know if a lot of people know or not, but there's a couple equine assisted therapy groups in Blount County. So if you want to work with, and have it, so if you want to work with animals and therapy, with children or, kids experiencing trauma, grief, and loss, get involved with those organizations and help. Come brush the horses, and see how the organization runs and how it works.
Yeah, Star Question out here is they're working with a lot.
Yeah,
Star. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's another one in Marable.
Yeah. So there's lots of different, it sounds like there's lots of different opportunities, whether it's a part-time job or volunteering, getting involved in student organizations, going to counseling or therapy yourself. You're on campus. We have some different service learning courses out of the Department of Psychology, recess balls, if anyone's done that, or the grief mentoring program out of the counseling department. Lots of great ways to test the waters.
Also, many churches have a counseling component, and that could be a way you have counseling. It also could be that you eventually could find yourself working. They don't have as many criteria for people to be working, as long as they feel that you're a competent individual.
Yeah, and our College of Social Work has, if you're interested, we mentioned equine therapy, they have a veterinary social work certificate, and they run the HABIT program. It's really cool, and I've definitely had students interested in that, so, yeah, absolutely. So another question that I a lot of times have to address with students that you may or may not be wondering is the difference. Let's say I have my bachelor's degree in whatever, psychology, and I know that I want to do individual therapy or group therapy. Well, what's the difference in doing clinical social work versus mental health counseling? So at UT, our mental health counseling program is located in our College of Education, Health and Human Sciences, and then our College of Social Work has two different master's tracks, clinical and another track which we call macro or management leadership and policy, and that is really focused more on nonprofit management, advocacy, sort of looking at the big picture, not specifically looking at doing therapy. So, what are the, in your opinion, because I feel like it can be very difficult to explain, what are the differences, if any, if you see any, or if you see differences in the education but not in the jobs? Tell me a little bit about that.
Great question.
But that's a great question. And I think,
It's hard.
So I think obviously these answers will be different if we're talking about like master's or PhD.
Yeah.
So I love social work. I love social work. I love the ideas of it. I love how it's really interested in like, you know, if you look at the like preamble of our code of ethics, it talks about like the dignity and worth of every human person, and about how like our field is created to like promote that and to like underscore that. And kind of like the more I learned about it, I also, and this is something I would suggest to anyone who's interested, is I contacted someone in the department and I said, I'm just interested in learning about this MSW program. Who can I speak with? And I went and sat down with someone and they kind of like answered my questions. I had a name and a face and contact information for someone in that college. So if you're asking yourself, like, what should I do? I would make appointments with a couple of people, like maybe someone in counseling and someone in social work, so you could ask like about like things that you are particularly interested in. I think I just sent an email. I just looked on the website and I found someone in the department, maybe the head of the department, and I sent an email just saying, I'm a prospective like person interested in this. Please get back with me. In that conversation, I remember that the person I spoke with said, you know, social work is about helping people tell their own stories, like in their own way, and like that's a large part of what we do. And I just thought like that was something that I was really interested in, and it felt like a good fit for me. So I think that's a path that I took, and those are some things that I did that might be helpful to you guys. I really think anyone in this field who wants to make a career out of helping other people, like, good for you. Like, no matter what your education is or like what path you choose, like, that's a really great career and like a really good desire to have. But I also love social work, and we'll talk to anybody about it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a challenging question to answer because a lot of times you'll find that clinical mental health counselors and social workers end up working in the same places in the same jobs. I mean, Jennifer works at the UT Counseling Center. I work at the Mississippi Counseling Center. We essentially do very, very similar things, even though our degrees are different. But I'm sure we learned a lot of the same things in our grad program. I think of it, I would say there's different models in which social work and counseling sort of approach, you know, understanding human behavior, our models of therapy. We work from a wellness model, you know, and so that was something that really stuck me when I was considering what program to go through. You know, it's really hard. I would say that the best advice would be to, if you're kind of going, would I want to take social work or would I want to go mental health, sit down with faculty in both those programs and say, what makes you unique? You know, what makes your program different? How are you different than social work? How are you different from clinical psych? And how are you different from mental health counseling? And ask those questions, and then go with the one that you feel like maybe most resonates with you. Because I hear a really powerful connection, you know, for you, really resonated with you, and sort of this idea of not seeing people as sick, but this wellness idea really resonated with me for an approach to working with people. So I think it really just, you know, depends on what you're looking for. You'll probably end up in, you know, similar jobs. I know the counseling field was sort of birthed. We got our start actually in career counseling. That was sort of the beginning. So that is a big component of our history. Was we sort of started in career, and then it evolved into more of mental health and then family and things like that. So you know, just the origins are different. The length of time the fields have been around. Social work has been around a lot longer than mental health counseling has been around. So it's just stuff you'll learn as you sit down with people and ask the questions.
So I'm actually working on my license right now. I graduated last August, and so I have about another year before I'm eligible to get my license. And so, like she was saying, there's a lot of like detail and stuff about what you need to do while you get your license. One of those things is to be supervised by somebody who's licensed and certified supervisor. So part of my hours for that is actually from a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I think that's a really great experience to have in addition to my schooling. One thing that I've learned going to a marriage and family therapist for some supervision is that they have a lot of theories that they use that guide their practice that in my program we saw about this much of, because we looked at other theories. And so I think it's been really helpful for me to just have a larger variety, and it gives me a different perspective with my clients. Sometimes when I get a little stuck, to think about, okay, let me take this theory and look at it through that lens, and I can see things a little differently. So I would say it's probably kind of the same thing with social work too, like you mentioned about the modalities and stuff, that we all just kind of look at the same thing in a different way.
Yeah, I like how you said the lenses. It's almost like you're looking at human behavior just through 3 different sets of lenses, how you understand it, you know, how you treat it, how you work with it. And you've got to find the one that kind of fits with your personal needs.
And the same thing would be said for psychology.
Same thing for psychology,
Yes, yeah. And sometimes people ask me about the difference between counseling and clinical psychology. Do you have any insight into that?
Well, counseling was originally set up sort of as focused on counseling, say, at the university level or school level. But now, counseling psychologists and clinical psychologists often do the same thing. So, even though that was the sort of origin back however many years ago, they've sort of merged.
Yes.
It's not really a huge difference.
And that is I think one thing that was kind of came out is a lot of people are doing really the same type of jobs, but their educational background is a little different. The theories that they use may be a little different, but you can find counselors and social workers and psychologists and marriage and family therapists in the same organizations doing very similar work. So.
And I'd point out too, there are a lot of different models or theories about what makes us human. And the image I usually use is the blind man looking at an elephant. You know, you touch different parts and you get a different image. But finally, the thing that really counts in therapy is the relationship you have with the person in front of you. And so, and there's actually research, a guy, Epps over here at Vanderbilt, he tried to analyze, okay, what makes a different theory work better than another? And the only thing he came out with is the relationship. That's what predicted how well it was going to work.
Good point. Interesting. So I want to ask you to kind of close out my portion and then open it up to the students for your questions for our panelists. But what do you say are the biggest myths about this field? Something that people might, say, and you would like to correct that, or say this is not, this is not true. This has not been my experience.
I think many people think if they go see a psychologist, it means there's something wrong with them. And what I would suggest is every one of us struggles at some point in our lives. If you don't, you're not alive. You're brain dead or something. You have to struggle. That's part of existence. And then seeing a psychologist sometimes helps, not always. Or social worker.
I hear a lot of they just need to get over that. And my clients come in and say, my mom tells me I just need to get over this. Well, you suffered abuse for 10 years of your life. You don't just get over that. And so I think that's a big myth of when bad things happen, people are just supposed to move on like it didn't happen, and that's not true.
I'm trying to think about how I want to answer that question. So I think that's a great myth for people actually coming to counseling. Maybe a myth about the job itself of being a mental health counselor. I think it just depends on the person. It can go either way. I think one myth is that everybody that gets a degree in counseling ends up in private practice, and that's the trajectory to go towards. Some will, some won't. And then I think the other myth on the other end of that spectrum is I hear they're high burnout jobs. Who can survive? You don't make any money. And that's not true either. I'm neither in private practice nor am I struggling to put a roof over my head. I'm in a job that I really enjoy and feel like I'm compensated well for. And so I think that I think you can hear, I guess, maybe you have an image or an idea about what it's like to work in that field, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that idea. I would say that maybe, again, if you think I mean, you can do outreach. I mean, it's not just one-on-one sitting across from a person doing therapy, although that is a huge part of the job, but there are so many other things you can do. If doing that for 8 to 10 hours a day sounds exhausting to you, and it does to me. I'm not somebody that can do 8 to 10 hours of sessions every day, but I still love being a counselor. So I guess I would maybe bust that myth that that's the only thing we do.
Also kind of like thinking about the myths that I had kind of in school and coming out of school and kind of what I know now. I thought that I was going to go to school and get a degree and have a lot of information and then help a lot of people. And that there would be this really linear path to people getting better, and I get to see that and help with it, and they would be really grateful. And that happens sometimes. And I also think that change is really hard. And my ability to influence change is different than I thought it would be. And that sometimes I sit with people, I empathize with the difficulty of changing. I think my expectations of what counseling would be are much different than what I thought that they would be. And that's fine. I mean, I think that that's like the reality of doing a job, and like expectations of myself and even expectations of the client. Like change is really hard, and I think anyone who's tried to change something really important like probably knows that. And so I think that I thought that and it's okay, so I said all that, and it's still really great. Like, I don't want to like tell you guys that people don't change or that it, I just think that I thought that would be like different than it is. And so my role in the room is a little bit different sometimes than I thought it would be.
Almost like the myth of like happy endings and like everything kind of being wrapped up at the end of counseling.
Yeah.
And I don't get that closure a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You just have to trust that the work that you did is gonna.
Yeah, and like your ability to influence another person does not change in proportion to your desire to do so, right? And so like this is your ability to influence someone else, and sometimes this is your desire, but it does not change your ability to do so. And so I think that is something that I still like kind of come to a lot.
I have just a couple of other questions, because sometimes students do broadly ask about this. If you can answer just kind of broadly. Lisa, you mentioned sort of the burnout and one end, people thinking, oh, it's really a lot of work for, not a lot of kind of back to you compensation, which is what I'm trying to get at in a second. Or other people think like, I'm going to go into private practice and get to sort of pick my clients and have, this is my word, but like have like designer clients, like have clients that are just like you, like that have my little tiny issues or whatever, and that's also probably not the case starting out. That doesn't happen immediately. But getting back to my point, pay. What is the general pay in the field? Scales, maybe talking just a little bit about maybe the differences in settings. Maybe that has something to do with pay. Just give a little bit. You don't have to go into too deep of specifics, but just kind of give us a little bit of a picture of what people might expect. At different levels,
okay,
too.
so since I've started out at like different levels, I don't want to like monopolize the big conversation, but I mean, so I think it definitely depends on where you work, what setting you're in what level of education you have, if you're licensed or not. I mean, all of those things come into play. I mean, if you are fresh out with your bachelor's degree, working for like a community agency, and so you might be able to speak to this too, I would say, I mean, probably like mid-20s to mid-30s is sort of where you start out as like a case manager. I mean, so it's not...
It's a good range,
it's probably a good range for something like that. If
that's
you
about right.
choose to work for like DCS or the state or something, you're probably looking for more like 30s to low 40s for something like that. Then once you get your master's, once you get licensed, again, if you're working for a community agency or like a college counseling center, I think that can range from probably like, I would say like 40 to like 70 maybe, somewhere in there. And this is again with the master's.
Big range,
Big
masters.
Like it really depends on where you work, how many years of experience, if you're licensed, and then just where you work. Like I know Pellissippi pays very different than other colleges and UT, and I mean, so it just depends. But I would say like mid-40s to mid-60s, somewhere like that. And then I think if you work in private practice, it all depends on if you take insurance, what kind of clients you're seeing, how much you charge per willing to bust your tail. So like, I mean, if you are working 60-hour weeks in private practice really hard, I mean, you can easily make a six-figure income, but it's not, when I say easily, I mean like you're working a lot of hours to be able to do something like that. It's absolutely not out of the question, you know, to make a six-figure income. It just depends on how many hours of clients you want to log, what type of insurance, are you private pay, you know, I mean, all those things really come into play. I can't really speak to psychologists' salaries, I mean, as much.
Well, and Peter, you mentioned you work till 7 or 8 each night, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that does not sound fun to me, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, well,
Well, but I know you have to work with when the client schedules, right? If you
Yeah.
have someone that works all day, they can't come to see you. So that's something to think about too. But yeah, if you could speak to the pay range or just anything that you want to provide us with.
okay, it does, to some degree, it's what you charge, but the insurance companies kind of put a cap on all that.
Okay.
And you really have to struggle with insurance. I mean, I'm fairly cynical, I think they're most sociopaths. Not laughing either, but nonetheless. Once you get on an insurance panel, then you also have to fight with insurance. And that may seem strange. If you're just doing therapy, it often is fairly straightforward. But I finally got a lady helping me, Amy, who's so obsessive, it's just wonderful. She has a phone conversation with somebody in insurance, she writes down every word they say, she writes down their name, she gets a code for the call, and then we submit the bill, they deny coverage, she calls them up and says, well, on this date, so-and-so said such and such, and then we pay. But if you don't do all that, they don't pay. So insurance is really a difficult thing to deal with. When I do work for legal systems, that's different. The state pays $150 an hour, so however much you do, you get that paid, but it doesn't come in immediately. It might be 3 or 4 months down the road. And if you do legal work that's not for the state, then that's usually $200. But that then pays pretty well, provided they pay you. You know, so you have a huge range. And then I have several patients I see pro bono because they don't have any money.
Yeah.
So you know,
And
there's
that's
a balance there.
encouraged. It's encouraged.
Some pro bono, interesting. Just like lawyers need some pro bono clients. Okay. Sounds good. All right, well, this has been really great. So I want to open it up now to the audience. If you have questions for our panelists about anything that they're involved in, raise your hand and I'll call you. And don't be shy, it's okay. Yes, and what's your name?
Ayana.
Okay, what's your question?
Alright, so this is like for all of y'all, but what is your end goal in your career? Like what do you your end goal, like what do you see yourself, like if a person asks you in your profession, what do you want to accomplish or what do you want to say that you were able to do, like for example, like find a cure for something or like discover something or anything like, or make a nonprofit, whatever that is, like what would you say yours is, if that applies?
I think that's a really good question. So I think looking at that on 2 levels, ultimately one thing I would like to do is work with providers in the field. This is like years down the road for me, and help them with like what I call like genuine self-care. Like, because when I started this field, I thought that self-care was like going by a Starbucks and giving yourself an iced coffee on the way to work, because that would make you happy that morning. And I think that that's true. It does make me a little happy, but it does not, at the end of the day, help my exhaustion some days. And so helping people in this field like genuinely care for themselves and find out what that means for them. That's what I would like to do. Currently, my end goal every day with every person I see is to help them feel understood, to help them feel like I care and like I'm willing to help them, and to keep them safe from harming themselves or someone else. So there's kind of like the immediate goal that I try to go into every appointment with, and then when I think of my career goals, I would like to work with like providers who are exhausted and burnout, and not enough Starbucks is going to be able to help them.
Separate question. So I'll take the same kind of approach that Jennifer took of like personal, like in my clinical work, and then also like where I want to go with my job. I mean, so I would speak to your question, Ayana, and I think it's a good question of where do I want to go? And you mentioned this a little bit, like your learning sort of never stops. I mean, I would have said, well, I'm going to get my master's and then I'm done. You know, I'm done. And now I'm in a job program. And I would say that for sure by the time I have my PhD, I'm done. But probably not. I mean, I think that it's just, I don't know, there's a curiosity there, there's a desire to learn. You know, perhaps it'll be, you know, right now I'm thinking about counselor education, educating future counselors, teaching in a graduate program. You know, perhaps like clinical supervision or direction. I would say I don't know, and I'm really okay with that because I feel like excited about the possibilities. I know that I don't want to just stay doing therapy until I retire. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I want to always have that as a component of my job, but I really want to dabble in some of the research and some of the teaching and those opportunities that my field provides. Personally, I would say very much like what Jennifer said, in my work with clients right now, like what is my goal, is definitely that they feel understood, that they feel known and seen. You will have people that share things with you that they have never told another soul. And that is a huge responsibility, and I don't want them to feel shame for that. You know, I mean, I want them to feel like they came and they shared and they feel empowered by their sharing experience. And so I would say that that's my goal for my clinical work. But as far as where my career is going, we'll see.
I agree with you on that one. I have certain steps that I definitely want to reach, and then a lot of really big goals that I don't know if, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, if I'm still going to want that, but because I may want something different. So my next step is to get licensed. I really like working in community mental health, and so I don't know if I'll try to work with a similar population in private practice or if I'll stay with an organization. Got at least a year to figure that out, so we'll see how it goes. I really would like to get a PhD in, there's a program in California with mind-body medicine, and it's just looking at like holistically, because it's not just like the psychology of things or the brain. It's diet, it's exercise, it's environment, it's all these things. And so I definitely want more education in that, because I think of what's going on. So I want to know more about that. I've also considered going in a track like yours to where I would be able to teach and provide supervision. That would be the much more logical, affordable approach than moving to California. But we'll see what happens there. As far as like clinically in my day-to-day work, I want people to feel comfortable and safe in my office, and I want them to leave feeling better than when they came in.
Any specific goals?
Specific, gosh,
You kind of actually talked about you're already working on, you've done some of those with the paving your path with neuropsychology, right?
Yeah, and I just did training about 2 months ago in neurofeedback. I don't know if y'all have heard of neurofeedback. It's kind of the latest iteration of biofeedback, but it's gotten sophisticated enough now that it actually is working rather miraculously with a lot of different issues. In fact, a couple of studies, 20% of people with seizure disorders got their seizures to stop. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So that's exciting, but the integration of neuropsychology, neurology, development with psychology, I often cite this one study because it kind of gives you a glimpse of what's happening. This guy, Alan Shore, writes these dense books. They're interesting, they're very dense. He cited this one research study where they took mothers and infants and put EEG electrodes on both, waited for the infants to become distressed. The mothers who were able to calm their infants lifted their infants up, looked into their eyes, and within 30 seconds their brainwaves synchronized. So the mothers informed the infants how to calm down. Put glasses on the mother, sunglasses, it doesn't work. Got to be able to look into the eyes. So something's happening there. We don't know exactly what, but something's happening. And that all is intriguing to me. That just excites me. I get so interested in that stuff. I go, yeah, I got to learn more about this. I'm going to help you if I can figure this stuff out. So that's what I'm doing.
Interesting. Yes.
Okay, kind of 2 questions.
Okay.
So number one,
I eventually want to get licensed as an LPC, and then either go into a PhD program for clinical or counseling psychology. I haven't decided which. Still looking into that. But so I heard one of you say that it takes like a year after you graduate from master's to get your licensure.
2 years. More than a year.
2 years
At
to
a
get
minimum.
it?
A minimum.
Okay, and that's after you graduate.
That's after you graduate. You
Okay.
can't start until after you graduate.
Okay, and then there's a lot of counseling master's programs, which are in education and not psychology and science. Can you get your master's in counseling of education and then go on and get a PhD in psychology?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
When I got a master's in psychology, then when I went to the doctoral program, they allowed me to take some of my credits and apply them to the requirements of the doctoral program. I don't know whether that would transfer. But
So, I want to say a little bit about this. Yes, you can do that. There are people that have a master's in counseling or a master's in social work and go on and get their PhD in clinical or counseling side. However, there are also people that do direct entry to doctoral programs in psychology.
I would
You
advise
can't,
something
Yes.
I'm actually reading a book right now.
Yeah.
It's called Insider's Guide to Clinical and Counseling Program,
Yeah.
Graduate Programs. So I'm reading that right now, and from what I understand, counseling programs counseling psychology programs prefer you to have a master's, regardless of what it's in. But clinical, it's either actually preferable or it doesn't really matter if you have a master's, but it's preferable for you to actually go in as a bachelor degree holder and not a master's. Just go directly in to get your PhD, which is interesting. I think, but.
yeah, it can depend,
Yeah.
but also the bottom line with the psychology programs is they care about your research experience. Did you have research experience in your master's program or, yeah. So they do, in addition to having clinical experience, did anyone going into their master's program have research experience? Yeah.
Going into it?
Yeah, going into it, no. You do it, I know you do it in your doctoral program, but that's,
Does being a research assistant count?
it can.
to some degree,
Yeah, to some degree, yeah, it can. Mm-hmm.
The programs in psychology, the doctoral programs, the first year I applied, I'm a climber, so I applied to all these programs that had to do rock climbing. Fortunately, I didn't get into them because they're all behavioral, I found out later. I got into UT, which was very much oriented towards psychodynamic theories, and that was much more what I needed to be getting into, so it was good. And the climbing was fair too, so. But nonetheless, so you really want to look at what is it you want to do and what kind of theoretical understanding you want to gain. Because the different programs have very different perspectives on what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna finish the book.
It's possible, but I think you just want to, there's different routes that you can take, so.
Yeah, that would be a longer
Yes,
route to go.
yes.
With the licensure. You're on the right track of looking at, do they want a master's, do they not, before I get into the program. But that may not be the best master's. If you're wanting to become a licensed psychologist, I don't know that you need that pit stop in between to be a licensed counselor also.
Yeah.
You may
No.
want to focus more on the psychology master's to go straight into the program.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're
You have a greater likelihood of transferring credits that way,
You
which is no
definitely
small
have,
issue.
Yeah, it's no small. You're not going to take them from the COUN area and apply them to the PSY. I have
Yeah.
run into that issue
So
myself.
you can get licensed as an LPC with a master's in psychology?
No,
No.
it has to be in
They're
counseling.
two totally separate tracks. So you're almost talking about jumping from one track to the
Yes.
other.
Mhm.
You probably want to pick one and
And-
go with one.
Yeah, and most master's programs in psychology these days are research focused, kind of designed as stepping stones to the PhD. They're not licensing you to counsel or do therapy. You have to get the PhD in psychology to do that.
And your PhD in psychology will give you the
Yeah.
ability to do, be licensed and do
Yeah.
therapy. It's just going to be a little bit longer of a process than the mental health. But those are two totally different. You have to think of
Yeah.
the COUN courses are really different than the PSY, and they don't really transfer.
Yeah.
from that.
Yes.
Okay, so say you get your master's degree in like licensed clinical social work or like yours. How do you go about getting licensed afterwards? Because you said those are two separate things.
Yeah, every field is different. Jennifer can tell you about licensure for social work, and I think we can tell you, you're in the throes of licensure, so you could really speak to licensure for mental health if you want. Do you want to take that one, or?
Sure. So to get your LPC, there's actually two different licenses. One is just the LPC, and one is an LPC MHSP, which is just the mental health service provider designation. So with that designation, that allows you to actually diagnose and treat mental health disorders, and that is the one that you would be able to bill insurance and those types of things. And so the criteria for the two are a little bit different. For just getting an LPC, they have a little more leeway with things. For the LPC and MHSP, they're much more strict. So you have to get 150 hours of supervision. Your supervisor has to be a certified supervisor, and at least half of those hours, so at least 75, have to be by a certified supervisor that also has an LPC MHSP. The other half could be a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a psychologist, as long as they have that specific criteria to be a supervisor. You also have to get 3,000 hours of half of those hours are direct time with clients. The other half are just all the extra stuff that goes along with therapy, going to trainings, things like that. The minimum time period is 2 years. You have to take 3 exams. The first one that you take is the National Counselor's Exam. They offer it like every month. They have some really great study materials for that, and that's just basic knowledge about counseling. And then there's, oh gosh, this one's longer.
Jurisprudence?
There's the jurisprudence. The second test you take is the National Clinical Health Counselor's Exam. Yeah, there's a lot of letters in that one. And that one, you're tested on assessing and diagnosing and treatment planning. And then the third one is the jurisprudence, and that one is off the Code of Ethics and Tennessee state laws regarding counselors. And so you have to pass all through those two, and all 3 exams cost money, a couple $100.
And the study materials also cost money.
Yes, and then typically you have to pay somebody for your supervision. Sometimes within an agency, like your supervisor can do part of it. Where I work, my supervisor is licensed, but she's not taken the course to be a certified supervisor. And so I go outside that to get my supervision hours.
And mine was licensed and had taken the course, so when I was negotiating my employment contract with her, that was something I had written into it, that she would provide supervision at no charge since she was my supervisor at my job, so I saved like a lot of money, a ton of money. Yeah.
And the LCSW is sort of
So
similar.
it's similar. So
Yeah.
you graduate with an MSW, and then ideally, as soon as you get a job, you get what we call an LMSW, which is Licensed Master of Social Work. That's a license you have to accrue hours and to receive supervision to get your LCSW. 3,000 hours of direct client contact, and the Board of Social Work, unfortunately for my job, does not accept case management hours because that's seen as a bachelor's level kind of qualification. So if you're getting a licensed clinical social work, like thing, they want you to be doing kind of like advanced practice. And so it's like a specific kind of work, like client contact, 3,000 hours and 100 hours of supervision with someone who's kind of an LCSW who's taken the test. And so that's what we have to do.
Similar time frame.
2 to 6 years.
Yeah.
It was 2 to 5.
Yes. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
So, I'm a double major in political science and psychology. Are there any jobs available in the government for?
It wasn't in psychology, there's psychologists in the CIA, there's psychologists throughout the government.
And you work with the courts doing evaluations, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just per court, I mean,
Sure.
courts will decide those.
Sure. Okay. So that kind of integrates that legal aspect a little bit. Yeah. There's definitely, the VA also has they have a lot of social workers. The Veterans Association, VA Hospital, they have a lot of social workers and psychologists, yeah.
Our public defender's office here has what they call the CLO, or the community law office.
That's right.
So they go in the court, they see people, they do evaluations, they kind of help the attorneys, and so that's.
Yeah, that's great, I forgot about that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the public defender's office here is a very good group of people.
Okay.
If you're looking for some experience, you might approach them.
Okay, awesome.
Did you have a question?
So is getting a PhD similar to like how it is in master's, where it takes a couple of years to get your license after, like, for PhD I know it's the 4 years instead of 2 years while in school, but this also takes a couple of years to get
After you get your actual degree, then you have to do a year's worth of supervised postdoc is what it's called. And you do that, and then you also have to take this national exam, which is probably similar in madness to what you guys have to do, but, you know, I got some used study materials for about a third of what they cost, but you know, you want your study materials in volumes, and you go in and take this exam. But if you get your PhD, most people end up working that first year in some kind of agency, a mental health center or something, a hospital somewhere. And so supervision is provided in that context.
Yeah. So there is a year-long
Yeah.
kind of internship or postdoc that you do with the PhD. And typically, how long does it take people? 4 or 5 years?
Postdoc for the
For
doctorate?
the doctorate, yeah.
At UT, when I came in, the average stint was 9 years.
That's really long, yeah.
I got through in 4.
4,
But
yeah.
I just turned out 4 years.
4 is very fast.
4 is very fast.
5, I see a lot. 5, so just with PhDs, yeah. Yeah. Going full time. Other questions?
Any answers?
Oh, yeah. Any other questions for our panelists that you, yes?
Okay, I came in a little late, but, what did you, Dr. Young, what did you, undergrad, and what was your,
Anthropology and philosophy. Allowed me to work as a mechanic. So, yeah.
And you have, your master's is from Western Carolina in psychology?
Yeah, and I would say that anthropology and philosophy were both very important.
Yeah.
Most people in psychology, and I imagine in social work, have very little sense of the limits of science. And science is very limited. And anthropology really clues you in about different cultures. And again, psychology has this certain, I assume social work too, but it has this sort of assumption that we're all alike. Well, that's not true at all. One of the interesting facts, the MMPI, you know, the standard big granddaddy of objective measures, the further you get away from Minnesota, the less reliable it gets. So in Florida, it's not as good as reliable.
That's the Minnesota personality index? Yeah. Multi-phasic, yes.
So, I mean, there's a lot of
All these
interesting
assessments.
stuff.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of backgrounds, and all of these, social work, psychology, mental health counseling, they take people with different undergraduate majors. So your undergraduate major does not have to be, so Jennifer's was in English, so we have psychology, child and family studies, and then we have anthropology and philosophy here. So yeah, they take people from a lot of different backgrounds. Yeah.
So, your PhD is it in neuropsychology or neuroscience?
No,
or?
they didn't really have neuro at UT.
Uh-huh.
I came hoping there was one guy here who had some claims to be a neuropsychologist. It turned out he really wasn't. But what I did then is I found a fellow in the hospital here at Fort Sanders. He took me under wing. So 2 days a week I worked with him for the first 3 years. So that, I sort of went off the program, and they sanctioned it. I worked with this guy 2 days a week.
Okay. Okay, I was wondering, because I knew that we only had like experimental, I think, and then
Right,
clinical
they
here.
don't have neuropsych here. That's
Yeah, I was just wondering.
A lot of people, and I think y'all can also speak to this, you, for example, if you're really interested in art therapy or play therapy or what have you, as using that as a technique, you don't necessarily have to go to school for art therapy. You could get your counseling degree or your social work, clinical social work, and integrate art therapy into your practice. Is that correct?
Put
Play.
learning into it. And,
Yeah.
you know,
You have to
Go to
study
seminars.
it.
Specializations require like continuing
Yes.
education, or small certifications.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't have to major in like play therapy or something.
Yes.
The neurofeedback on learning, I've only done the first initial 5-day program, but I know it's gonna be beneficial. But that's not, I don't think there's a program in this country at all.
Sure. Absolutely.
And that I think highlights the importance of like continuing education. Like you said, like I got like the degree and I was like, all right, like I have arrived. And there's like so much more. Like you learn from your clients every day, and you're also, I think, are like ethically, I mean, you are ethically bound to continue to learn because you have to have those in order to keep your LCSW or your PhD, but also like I think it's just good to keep learning, to keep helping the clients that they
Yeah.
can.
And that is something I guess we didn't mention, is that once you're licensed, it doesn't end there. You do have
Yeah.
continuing education requirements every year, which means, you know, you're logging 10, 15, 20 hours, depending on what your license requires, of certain training that you're then submitting to licensure boards in order to stay licensed. So they do require that you keep learning. Even if you don't get more degrees, even if you don't want to change fields, you do have like certain continuing education hours required every year.
And it really helps.
It really does help, yeah. It
And that's
really
also
helps
like
stay current.
true in law and like a
It
lot,
is.
like a lot of, if you
Uh-huh.
have like a professional
Medical,
Yeah.
license, you almost always have to do continuing
Yes,
education.
absolutely. Any last questions for our panelists? All right, well, let's give them all a hand. Thank you so much for coming. We have just a couple minutes if you want to ask them any questions by yourself. And then if you did not swipe in the back, could you give me your ID and I'll swipe you in really fast and then give it right back to you. I don't think so. Okay, awesome.